from the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. And I know it's terrible. It's the second time in a month where you've heard my voice as the first voice coming through your ear holes as part of the podcast, and I apologize for that. My beloved co-host, Mary McCusker, is taken ill today, so I am going to be here solo and talking to our guest, but we have a great lineup. Fortunately, I booked someone who's far more talkative than myself, Mr. Kevin Hickey, who is the Executive Director of Catholic Charities, Diocese of Camden. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Hello, Michael. Today, I don't think I will be talkative.
No, I think you will. I don't think you can restrain yourself.
Oh, there might be something to that. But that gets to what we were talking off the mic on Rule 3 of the Chapter 3 of the Rule of Benedict. Restraint in speaking.
Fortunately, I have never read that, so I will not have a problem. And my other guest today is Sylvia Loumeau, who is the Director of Clinical Services at Catholic Charities, Diocese of Camden. How are you doing, Sylvia?
I am doing well, Mike.
That's great. I am very happy. We've been trying to get you on the podcast pretty much from the first season.
So I've been successful in avoiding.
Yes, you have, and that those days are over now. So thank you for being here.
So like the Howard Hughes of Catholic Charities.
Wow. I always enjoy your esoteric analogies. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So the question is, do we wait to start talking about France, or do we go shoot right into it? Just no. We'll talk about that at the end. The reason that I'm here today specifically is because I wanted to talk about the iThirst initiative that the Diocese of Camden, in the Diocese of Camden, that the Catholic Charities has started. It's particularly for those families suffering through family members who have been plagued with addiction. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you give me a little bit of background on iThirst?
So iThirst is a creation of Keaton Douglas, who is with the I'm going to forget the name of the missionary
servants of the Most Holy Trinity.
Oh wow,
right.
That is a mouthful.
Up in the Diocese of Paterson, and so there was a recognition, obviously, that we as a church needed to be doing something about substance abuse, and so Keaton was called to come up with a program that has been very well received in Paterson, and so we are bringing it here to the Diocese of Camden.
And it's something I know Bishop Sullivan, particularly as we were putting together a lot of the program materials for Catholic Strong. One of the things he mentioned to people repeatedly was making sure that we made available to the parishes and to the ministries around the diocese the opportunity for addiction services, particularly for families who are struggling with it, in addition to people who themselves are individually struggling with it. So your first iThirst sort of introduction meeting was just a few weeks ago, right?
We had one presentation in May, which was very well received. We did that at Cumberland County College, and we realized that we needed to continue to introduce it, and so our second session was just this past Saturday. Again, very well received, and so we have a number of people in the parishes. One of the things we didn't realize was just how much is already going on in the parishes.
Yeah.
That we were really happy to get to know, but they were longing for some way to be more connected with others that are doing this work, and to have like some model that they can ground themselves to. And so they were thrilled to hear about the iThirst program.
So what does the iThirst model look like?
So it is it's a spiritual companionship program that is very similar to Stephen's ministry. So these are lay people that get trained in intensive training to learn how to be in the company of people who are struggling, either in their own recovery, or family members who are struggling as their loved ones are still in the midst of their addiction. Really, it's a a ministry of presence, being in the company of people who are suffering and walking with them through their through that struggle, and just to know that they are not alone in that process.
Both Pope Francis and Bishop Sullivan have remarked on repeatedly the importance of accompaniment, not just to get to know people and know where they're from. We certainly have done accompaniment through the Share the Journey program quite a bit. But this, substance abuse, I think of all the plagues that currently exist, I would have to say substance abuse is the one, and correct me if I'm wrong, both of you, where there's still a shame factor involved for both the person involved and the family associated with it.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that iThirst is trying to help people to better understand, and I think as a society and maybe even as a church, we've looked at substance abuse as some sort of moral failing on the part of the addicted person, and we know a whole lot more now about the role of trauma as it relates to substance abuse, and we also know in this current opioid crisis, the role that the pharmaceutical companies played in essentially getting people addicted to these drugs that now they have a difficult time coming off of.
Yeah.
So it's not the moral piece, but all of these other elements.
And one of the things that Keaton discussed Saturday was the neurological implications of substance abuse. So that's another area where our knowledge is so different than
exactly
when you and I were being trained.
And that really connects to the whole trauma piece, because oftentimes people who are addicted to drugs have experienced some type of early life trauma. And as their brains are formed by their experiences, they may learn that substances are what helps them to cope. And so the more exposure there is to that as a coping mechanism, the more likely they are to turn to it. And it forms their brains to seek it.
We mentioned that the opioid crisis here. Have you found, Kevin, that you've been getting a lot of requests from the community to do more with substance abuse maybe than before?
I think the parishes are clearly thirsting for it.
Right.
And certainly with Bishop Sullivan, anything, in this case Catholic Charities, can do to equip and enable parishes to be centers, in this case centers of hope for families and addicts. And that's what this iThirst is. It's a tool which Michael is under this umbrella of addiction healing services here at Catholic Charities. So we're going to be doing other things, but this is our primary focus, I would say, for the next year or so, is to supporting parishes, to those that want to. And we've certainly the Vicar General, Father Hughes, has a pretty good sense of where he thinks the parishes geographically will be. But this has been a constant thing. I always remember a man who came to see me, referred to me by his pastor, and this was 15 years ago, Mike, and his son was in jail when he was talking to me, and his son was in his late 30s, and his father said, "It's ruined my life." Led to a breakup of his marriage. The son, his siblings wanted nothing to do with him. And this man was in his mid-70s.
Wow.
And I thought, and he'd been contending with this for 20 years.
Yeah.
That moment in one's life where you're thinking, okay, you're going to relax a little bit, enjoy maybe retirement. This guy was still working, needed the money.
Yeah.
And that gives you an indication of how this disease is it affects the entire family and friends and things like that. And that's, we've had, a number of, I've had a number of conversations with parents of say, you have to separate yourself. And Keaton Douglas talked about this the other morning about how you can love the addict without endorsing behavior, but also setting clear boundaries is the word I think she used. So, but that's really hard to do that, right? When you're watching your son or your daughter, or your brother, your cousin, whoever that might be. I mean, it's a horrible thing. And, in addition to the pharmaceutical industry, in my own life, I've had experience of people with mental illness essentially self-medicating themselves. So that's involved here as well. So it's incredibly complex.
And that's, I was just about to say, that's sort of the nature of this beast. Is it's pharmacological, it's psychological, it's impacted by if they had been victimized as a young person, for that matter, even as an adult. And unfortunately, there really is no silver bullet. I mean, there is no one fix for any of these things. We've always, I feel like the last 20 or 30 years, when it comes to a lot of these sort of social dangers, we're often given what is it? The whole dare thing. If you just say no. So we had the whole just say no thing. Well, just say no wasn't really a viable option. I mean, it's for some people, just saying no is enough, but for a lot of people who are addicts, it had nothing to do with saying no. It was, their brains weren't wired the way that you could get away with just saying no. I mean, have you found that in your long career, Sylvia?
Yeah. Again, I mean, going back to that whole the trauma piece. When your brain has been formed by traumatic events, it just makes the drug a more necessary way of coping, at least from that perspective.
I'm curious, Sylvia. Before we get on the podcast, I much to your chagrin, refer to you as a expert in your field, and why you should have no concerns at all about being on the podcast and what you might have to say. But what led you to this? Like, what made you become a social worker?
Well, so I always knew, like from the time that I was, 8 years old, that what I wanted to do was help people. And there was an evolution from I want to be a nurse like Florence Nightingale to, wanting to be a doctor because I was a feminist, to, discovering social work as a senior in high school. But what really solidified it for me was my freshman year in college. Met a friend who lived in the city of Philadelphia and invited me home for the weekend. And so we were walking around the city, and there was a pile of newspapers on the ground. And she grabbed me by the arm and she said, "Oh, don't step on the homeless person."
Wow.
And it never even occurred to me that there would be a person underneath of those newspapers.
Yeah.
And, from that point on, I just felt like this is not okay. Yeah. I need to be part of doing something.
When you were young, did you feel like you had a particularly empathetic nature to you? Like, were you always sort of, in addition to wanting to be a nurse or a doctor, but I know a lot of nurses and doctors, well, I don't know about nurses, but I know a lot of doctors I wouldn't call empathetic. There's something a little else that's there. Like when you were young, like what did you feel like you really wanted to do? Like, I guess my question is, growing up, in addition to wanting to be a doctor, did you feel the need to help people?
I think I always felt the need to be doing something to help in my family. Mm-hmm. There was substance abuse in my family history as well. And so substance abuse often leads to some of the conflict that Kevin was talking about. And so I saw my role as kind of, trying to ease the burden of the stress in the family. I
happen to be friends with a lot of social workers, and I routinely which I think I've said to the two of you not too long ago. I don't know how you do it, because it's a very difficult job, particularly when you're basically working with other people's pain constantly and their difficulties, and some of those difficulties, as we talked earlier, are just so built in. As someone on the outside who hasn't had to do this very often, I've had a couple of occasions where I've had to deal with mental health issues in my family, but not particularly directly, and not where I needed to accompany the person. How do you find the energy and the mental awareness and the desire after, I'm going to say more than 5 years on the job?
A little more than 5.
For anyone who doesn't know, Sylvia is one of the longest tenured people here at Catholic Charities.
Yeah. I get a lot of energy from people that are newer in the field, and who still have the idealism, but also just like it's like exciting to be part of their growth, and so that like reconnects me all the time with what I think and what I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing. So that's a big part of it. It's I love having interns here that connects me with my desire to be part of the change.
Since you've been at the Catholic Charities, what kind of programs have you worked on?
I feel like I have worked in almost every program in some fashion or another. I started, my first job was as a counselor for unwed mothers that were contemplating adoption.
Oh, wow.
And then I started did a little bit of work with the adoptive couples, and monitoring the family once a child had been placed with them. Went to work in our counseling program, which is where primarily I'm stationed now. I have coordinated our Project Rachel program. I've worked very closely with the folks in our Family and Community Center, done some grant writing, very much involved in our quality assurance program. I've had a great opportunity to do some disaster relief work.
I get the impression Catholic Charities is where you go to kind of do everything.
Yeah.
Right? Is that right, Mr. Hickey? You get an opportunity to really touch a lot of fields?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about Matthew 25...
and you often do.
Yes, we often do. That's what we're doing in the 21st century, all those things, and then interpreting them in the 21st century. Some disaster response. I always think of Sylvia. She has a big work ethic, right? So after Katrina, we were going to start sending Catholics down to New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. So we all went down as a staff, and there were, 12, 15 of us? And we got down there in, I think it was May.
Right.
And so it's already hot and
like
very
90
humid.
degrees.
And Jose Sanchez was the crew chief, and part of his responsibility is make sure we're safe, and including taking breaks, because we're all gowned up and masked and all that thing, and go outside, leave this house that we were tearing apart, essentially. Go outside, sit down, and drink water. And at one point, we're all sitting out there, and I'm looking around thinking, where the heck is Sylvia? She was still in the house.
Really?
So she works hard. She likes to work hard.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of lazy people around here. We've met a lot of your staff. I think as a group, I'm going to say that I've interviewed more Catholic Charities staff than of the 150 episodes we've done than any other entity.
I didn't know that.
I think that might be true. You do well. The thing is that the beauty of Catholic Charities is, we just talked about, there's so many different things that you're constantly working on, and quite frankly, so many of them are notable, and so many involve the community at large, which is something we like to showcase on the podcast. Is what we're doing, even though it took us so long to get Sylvia on the podcast, much to her efforts of resistance.
The Greta Garbo of Catholic
Yes.
Charities.
Just want to be alone.
I like how we're getting the French in here one way or the other. That's good. We are going to talk about France because Sylvia just went to France, and I'm very jealous.
Part of it too coincides, Michael, with my thinking about the work in the 21st century and how you retain people and how do you help people inspire themselves and they're adults, and so I know as an adult I like variety. I like I'm interested in a lot of different things, and it seems like there's a lot of opportunity here for people to do a lot of different things.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why I've been at Catholic Charities as long as I have been, because of that variety. There are a few places that I could go that would give me the same kind of mental stimulation.
Yeah. That's one of the things I hate to put it that way, but that's one of the things I love working at the diocese is I'm in the same boat because I do a lot of crisis communication, and I never know when my next tragedy is going to happen, unfortunately, but at the same time, professionally, I find that beneficial because I have fallen victim to idle hands or the devil's playground. Yeah, the worst thing in the world for me to be is bored. So I'd rather be helping people through tragedies than sitting on the couch eating bonbons and watching my shows. Just out of curiosity, I didn't actually ask you this question, but how long have you been at Catholic Charities, Sylvia?
It was 30 years this past July.
30 years? Sylvia, you don't even look like you've been here at 30.
Thank you very much,
My
Michael.
goodness. Are you I'm looking at Kevin right now, but are you the longest tenured person at Catholic Charities?
I think now you are, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations,
How about
Sylvia.
that?
Yeah. That's truly amazing. As someone who's never stayed anywhere longer than 4 years and 9 months, I'm blown away by someone who stayed 30 years. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. I got to imagine you've sort of moved from office to office too.
So interestingly, this building that we're in now is where I started.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and I have worked, we had an office in Newfield, we had an office in Gibbstown. I worked in both of those offices, our office in Vineland. So you know all the back roads to get around South Jersey. Exactly. I've had I've been at every single one of our offices, for one reason or another.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
And that, of course, that's why the addiction healing will Sylvia will supervise that. And of course, that's why she's particularly valuable in that context. She's got a wide variety of experiences, great understanding of, in this case, addictions, great understanding of trauma. She's also, by the way, our subject matter expert in domestic violence. Mm-hmm. And she mentioned when Sylvia was talking about adoptions, I was thinking there is another, we think of it a lot of happy stories, a child finding a home, but it's also very, very difficult work.
Yeah.
Subject to a lot of incredible emotional highs and then lows. And you wouldn't think that, just thinking about adoptions, but it's tough. But so addiction services is in good hands here with Sylvia.
No, that's wonderful to hear. Only because I've teased it a couple of times, you are French, and you did just come back from France, and it sounds like you try to go to France on a regular basis.
I want her to retire there when she retires.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then we can go visit her.
Oh, I like that.
I was actually challenged by my boss last year to make a trip to France. I hadn't been in about 20 years.
Oh no!
And so Kevin strongly encouraged me to go, and so there was. I have my family there. Both of my parents emigrated, and so the rest of the family remained behind. And so, as the family ages, it's like if I want to see them, then now's the chance.
And I think of the French as cultured people, literate.
I'm part French, right?
Yes.
Cultured and literate.
Sophisticated. Cosmopolitan.
That's so big.
And those are words that apply to Sylvia. And of course, she's French, and she has facility in the language. And I don't think it would take her very long if she was able to spend more time there to, really get to a point. I think she's already pretty good, but as we were talking earlier, she would say, "No, I'm not really that good in."
I suspect you are. But here's the thing, I tell people all the time that of all the languages, French and German for English speakers, shouldn't be too difficult because English is derived from French and German. So I recently went to France a year ago and blew my son's mind when I ordered lunch in French. And now it was only because we went to a stand where I could read it all off the menu. So because I can read and speak it, I can understand most of it. I can't actually have a conversation with anybody because I have to see it. I can't hear it. I have no idea.
Well, so the interesting thing is, my French is okay, and I was able to make myself understood. But in Paris, when I would try to use my French and show that I had some facility in the language and respect for them, that I'm going to try, and they would kind of give me this look and, and then just answer me in English anyway.
I think that might be more Parisian than French.
I think so. I think you're right.
Where was your family from?
So my mom's side of the family is from Brittany, Normandy, and my dad was from the Bordeaux region, Charente-Maritime.
Oh, okay. Well, we were talking I don't know what town they're from, but my family's from Bordeaux as well. So if anybody wants to look them up, they're the Vinets. You can find them anywhere. Apparently, they lived in wine country, but didn't work at the wineries. So, so where did you go in France while you were there?
So I spent a few days in Paris before I took the train to Bordeaux, and stayed with a cousin who lives in Pessac. And so he took me, kind of all around the Bordeaux region, Arcachon, and oh gosh, now I'm going to forget the name of where I went. But we went to a place that's on a hill, and there's a whole vineyard there.
See, makes you want to travel again. I haven't been anywhere in forever, and barely used my vacation days for this year. As a matter of fact, I always hate it when that happens. It's like, I look at the end of the year and I go, man, I haven't used any of I got half my vacation days left. I'm about to lose them all at the end of the year. Always painful. But that's cool. Do you find that a little bit of travel, a little vacation, are you able to sort of re-energize when you're away? Yeah,
I think it's always good to get to a new place, see something different, and it helps, especially being with my family. Just kind of helped me to give new perspective to how I see the world. It's just really interesting that I think the immigrant experience really does change how a family functions, right? Yeah. So my the French side of the family seem real well adjusted, whereas my side of the family, I think there was a lot of anxiety over how you assimilate, and so that kind of makes its way down. But
that's interesting. The just to go back to iThirst as we wrap up, we're going to keep today short because, well, everyone here has a lot of work to do. How could people bring iThirst to their parish or community?
So we were starting off with the folks that were at the sessions, kind of asking, would somebody be willing to step up and either tell your pastor that you're willing to take a role in it, or just to say that they want to be the point person at their parish. So if somebody has an interest, they can just let us know that. We're going to be doing some additional training come this spring, some more intensive training. So we're anticipating that it'll be like a 48-hour training. So we just hired a new substance abuse services coordinator. Joanne Farrell is her name. She's going to be joining us in early December. So folks can give her a call once she's gotten settled into her new position a little bit. And then she'll be, part of what she's going to be doing is connecting with each of the parishes to find out, is there somebody that's raise their hand to be that point person, and then, coordinate them to be at the next session.
Okay. And if anybody wants to find out more about iThirst, where could they go? Is it up on the website?
It's on the website,
okay.
And they can call Sylvia or myself.
Okay, so that's CatholicCharitiesCamden.org, probably /iThirst, but I didn't forget to look at it before we got on the thing.
Yeah, it is on there. It's either iThirst or Addiction Services.
Yeah, substance abuse services.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
That's it?
That's it. We're going to keep it tight today. Hey, listen. I know not to abuse someone who has never been a fan of coming on the podcast and has been resisting for 150
She seems
episodes.
like she's enjoying it.
Do you really think so?
I think so.
Oh,
yeah.
You sure?
Oh, she's got a lot to say.
I know.
Generally.
What a perfect little dig from the boss.
Right.
Isn't that so sweet?
Very proud of that one.
Thank you very much.
No, I don't. I think this is good. But the beauty of the podcast is we invite people back all the time. So now that Sylvia has finally made it on and realized it's not nearly as scary as she perhaps perceived, we'll probably have her back all the time.
I'll say this. I think, in addition to addictions, which is a hidden disease, a hidden thing that affects so many people, likewise domestic violence. I think that would be a great topic. Sylvia and I have long talked about ways of getting this into the church, church speaking broadly.
Yeah, I think both substance abuse and domestic violence are two topics that most families have been exposed to. It's 3 out of 4 women have experienced domestic violence. 1 out of 4 men have experienced domestic violence. Substance abuse, probably over 60 to 70% of all families have substance abuse. But they're both topics that we're afraid to talk about or to ask about, it's something that we need to uncover a little bit more, feel more comfortable talking about it and asking about it, because more than likely people have experienced one or the other.
That's domestic violence is one of those areas that are near and dear to my heart, and it gives me the opportunity to bring something up that I know Mr. Hickey always enjoys. But during my time at Volunteers of America Delaware Valley, I was very excited to ask Mr. Hickey goes thumbs down. That was one of the programs I worked a lot with, was their domestic violence program. I'm still one of the guys who wears purple during October for domestic violence month, as opposed to for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, wearing the pink, because I think it is an underserved community of people who, and there is a lot of shame with it, because you feel there's a sense of weakness that comes from people who are victims. Working at VOA, I also had the benefit of working with their batterers program as well, which was very unique in the sense that there weren't a lot of programs in Camden County at that time. Anyway, this is 15 years ago, that were serving people who had victimized folks. And it's tough. It's
interesting that you say that. I was thinking about that too. That our program is not as organized as VOA's program is, but we do a lot of assessments of people who have been accused of battering, and part of our role is holding them accountable. So it's the other side of domestic violence. Certainly we work with the victims of domestic violence, but really the way that, what we want to do ultimately is stop domestic violence and not just treat the victims. And so, and trauma is another, trauma is just such a pervasive issue, and it touches all of these social ills. So a lot of the perpetrators of domestic violence were victims of violence themselves too, and so it's a challenging thing to see them as both victim and perpetrator at the same time. But helping them to understand their own trauma experience so that they can stop inflicting trauma on future generations is an important thing.
That was, we use the phrase breaking the cycle all the time, and that was, granted, I'm not a social worker, and I don't claim to be, but I did have to be someone who communicated it a lot, and I have to say, the batter. I was at a number of the batters meetings because we would do interviews and with several of them. And that was what exactly, and you pointed out, it was they had been victimized as well, and it's not uncommon, and it is really a cycle, and it's something we see all too often, and the shame of it, and I would like to more than help promote the domestic violence programs going forward at Catholic Charities, of course, but maybe it's part of a larger conversation about what's going on culturally in the world. I mean, this isn't new. I mean, we said we've been working on. I mean, you've been working on it for decades, and I've off and on for 15 years. But I feel like it never gets the, particularly domestic violence, never gets the spotlight like a lot of the other social ills do, and I'm not entirely certain why.
Quite honestly, I think that part of it is because, we're still in a very male-dominated world, and domestic violence is more oftentimes perpetrated by men, and so it requires men to take a look at their own behavior, and not even just battering specifically, but how they talk to women, how they perceive women. These are things that are the crucible in which domestic violence can take place.
Oh yeah, I never want to refer to it as degree, but the different forms with which domestic violence can take place is you can be violent to your partner without ever hitting them.
Words are oftentimes the victims will say to us that that they could handle the physical part of the violence. It was the being degraded or, told that they were worthless. Those were the things that were more difficult for them to overcome, because after a while they would internalize it and have a very difficult time discerning what was real and what their partner had told them.
Well, Mr. Hickey, in your long career, Mr. Hickey, have you found that the communication about domestic violence has gotten better? Do you think it's sort of stagnated?
I think it is way more publicized and discussed than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. What is proving more intractable, I think, is what Sylvia was just talking about, and that is men coming to grips with their own inadequacies, I'd say, which then are projected onto women, or just having a conversation with somebody about. It's about a woman who was kind of a high achiever, and people reacted, including the spouse. And I was thinking, okay, this high achiever is a mirror, and people are seeing themselves, and they don't like what they're seeing. And I think that happens. So,
I would agree with that.
So I think what Sylvia was saying is that's what's got to happen here.
I can remember. So this was like late 80s, early 90s, we invited some folks from another agency to do some training for us. I don't remember what the training was about, but as they were talking, and these were two men that were doing the presentation, as they were talking, it started to become, evident that they were thinking about whatever the issue was through a male lens. And so I asked them, do you think about, have you thought about the impact on women and the likelihood that this would, lead to domestic violence? And their response was, well, we don't have a domestic violence problem. And, at that time we were just starting to, become more aware of the issue too, and had started asking our clients more specifically about domestic violence. And the response, that we gave them was, well, we didn't think we had a domestic violence problem either until we started asking about it. And if people aren't thinking about it, if they're not talking about it, they're not asking, but they're not going to see it.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of truth to that. Do you think that the Me Too movement has assisted with showcasing that domestic violence is still something that exists, and B, far more pervasive. Thank you. Pervasive than they thought.
I hope so. Yeah. I sure hope so. I think, it seems to have given women more freedom to talk about their own experiences, because women are often shut down, blamed for what has happened to them. Even other women will blame them. And so it's been very difficult. So, but yeah, I do think it's given women more permission, not just women, but, anyone who's been the victim of violence.
Yeah, I've been very pleased about what I've seen. I mean, I'm horrified by what I've seen come out during this we'll call it a Me Too revolution. But I've been pleased to see that so many women seem more comfortable. And you're right, not just women. I've actually seen a lot of gay men, as a matter of fact, as well, feel a lot more comfortable speaking publicly with less shame about, and it could be whether it was a battering situation or sexual abuse or anything. And I think ultimately that's great. If people, because I will admit that as a guy, and I admit my role in the patriarchy, I didn't see it growing up, and in my high school years, it never occurred to me that things that I was seen being done would have fallen into what's now considered abuse. And I'm very pleased that the kids my son's age, who's 11, they are hearing these things now that you don't realize is you're hurting somebody by doing that. And I'm very hopeful. It's moments like this where I'm very hopeful for the future. I really am. I genuinely am. I mentioned before that I talk with a lot of social workers, and I have to imagine that there's a sense of depression from time to time because there's always going to be somebody in pain. But do you feel that, I won't ask if things have gotten better, but things are more understood than they were 30 years ago, not just in terms of domestic violence, but social work in general?
Yes, I think so. I think, the whole trauma-informed care movement, I think, has really helped people to understand, the social pieces of our problems, but also the neurological, biological elements of why people are the way that they are. I think that really has helped to move us forward in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mr. Hickey, are there programs that you want to start that you haven't had either the ability or the funding to do?
I would say employment. And we're still looking at that. We know all kinds of things happen when people are unemployed or underemployed, notwithstanding the widely held belief that the current American economy is humming along. People are still, struggling with their wages. And of course, that's a whole other issue, the income distribution in the United States. But I've often thought having a good job cures a lot of ills. So that's probably my biggest thing I'd like to do.
And I'll probably irritate Mr. Hickey by saying this, but I think that growing our mental health programs is probably a good a way to help with the employment piece too. Because if people have experienced trauma, if they have substance abuse issues, if they have the whole array of social ills, it impedes their ability to be employable.
We didn't really touch on that, but you're absolutely right. The long-term effects of both, substance abuse and, domestic violence is you don't know when someone is going to be triggered, and something terrible could happen when they're at work, and they either walk off the job or they realize they're in a job they shouldn't be at, or something happens at the job directed towards them, and they cocoon, and they don't want to go back out.
Absolutely. I was just talking with one of my therapists the other day and about trauma, and the interesting thing about trauma, kind of the helpless piece of it from a helping professional's perspective, is that you just never know what someone's story is when you first meet them. So you have no idea what it is that might trigger them. It might, cause them to feel traumatized, to bring all of that back for them. It can be something as simple as extending your hand to say hello to them. If extending their hand was how they, if they experienced violence, that can be traumatizing for them, and cause them to walk away, or to react in a way that's going to be off-putting to a potential employer, things like that. So.
Throughout the conversation, you've used the word trauma repeatedly, and to the point now, I think I have a better understanding that that is a very large umbrella term for a lot of
another
ills.
podcast with Sylvia.
Oh yeah,
Trauma, trauma-informed care, trauma.
Careful, Sylvia, you may come back a lot. Well, that's the beauty of the problem. Whenever I find out that somebody's an expert in their field, is I go back to the well a lot. So just prepare yourself. You'll be coming back.
I'll enjoy talking with you again, Mark.
Hopefully we'll have more co-hosts, because I like to have a nice big room when we're having these chats. It's no good when it's all on me. I apologize to the listeners who have heard my ham-fisted conversations until we got into domestic violence, because that was an area where I do have an appreciation for it. Unfortunately, actually substance abuse is not something I'm well informed on. I mean, other than what I've read and seen in TV, but in terms of my personal life, I only had 2 people in my life, and I was sort of tertiary to their issues. But that's something we really do hear a lot more about, particularly from the parishes, is that it seems like it's more prevalent. As part of iThirst, or even your own professional understanding, Sylvia, is it more prevalent, or is it we understand it better now?
Well, I think, I think we certainly understand it better. I don't know. I mean, the opioid epidemic has certainly been, more visible and has impacted a huge number of people. But, throughout history, heroin use has kind of waxed and waned. So the 70s, 80s saw, a big increase in heroin use too, and then there was a decline through the 90s. And so, the various drugs have their trends. I think substance abuse has been an issue throughout time. I think that it's been normalized in many ways. There's, how do I say it? People go home and have a drink because it calms them down. That sounds like, like a perfectly reasonable thing,
Sure.
normal thing, and so we don't think about, well, maybe that's a problem.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just thinking that has alcoholism been sort of subjugated under the other abusives? Because we hear more about opioids, but we don't hear a lot about alcoholism anymore and alcoholics. Does it still? Would you find it still noted? Okay, I'm just curious.
Right.
It's like in your professional perspective.
So where issues like heroin use or meth use have kind of waxed and waned, alcohol use has kind of remained a constant. And like I said, so when I was a social work intern, my research project for a class was to identify how many of the clients on our roles in counseling had substance abuse in their history. Yeah. And again, it was one of those things that we thought, it's probably going to be like just a few, and we found that over 60%, and these were just people that had talked about it, that we didn't even necessarily probe about, but had just talked about it in their initial evaluation, on our caseload at the time, had substance abuse either themselves or like in their parent generation.
Wow. In my generation of family members, I don't think I have anybody there. Yeah, I don't think I know of any of us that have alcoholism problems. Of course, we also do a great job of hiding those things, but none that I'm aware of. But in my parents' generation, there were definitely, I can think of 3 people in particular who were undiagnosed alcoholics. It'll be the way I mean, almost blackout alcoholics. But it was so normal growing up that you never thought twice about it. It's just funny, name changed, Uncle Ethan. Would really, Thanksgiving and Christmas was always great at Uncle Ethan's house because you never knew what was going to come out of his mouth. But it wasn't violent. It was just funny. And years later, we realized, oh, that was a bad thing. We didn't know. The other hot topic that comes up nowadays is medical marijuana. And there seems to be a great deal of debate as to whether it actually has medicinal purposes or is it this gateway drug that people are underestimating. In your clinical background, do you have a feel for it?
So there's a definite distinction between medical marijuana and the stuff that folks are getting illegally right now. So medical marijuana essentially is the marijuana of the 1970s.
Okay.
And so it's a much less potent version of the drug that we're seeing kind of on the streets. Does that have some medicinal value? I think that there is some evidence to show that with certain health issues that there is some benefit to it. But the rise in interest in medical marijuana has led the public to think about the street drug as a less significant drug, and what we know is that it's way, way more potent than it ever has been in the past. Yeah, it's actually it's very dangerous. We see there's marijuana-induced psychosis symptoms that we see. There's a wide range of health issues that kids are suffering. I'll say kids because that's often the gateway.
Yeah.
And there's also in the African American community, a real acceptance of smoking weed that I think is, maybe another form of oppression.
Really?
Yeah, I think that the more it's seen. In the African American population and in the Caucasian population is like just something that African Americans do as just another way of keeping them from becoming successful, as a group. That's
an interesting perspective. I hadn't heard that before. I mean, I guess I've heard that generations ago, and that was. Heck, that was even part of I think there was a line of dialogue in The Godfather regarding keeping drugs in the African American population. I can't say that I've thought about that recently, but I guess anything is possible nowadays. That's wow. All right. What about are there any other drugs or substance abuse or trauma issues that have come to the forefront that Catholic Charities maybe assists with but isn't known for?
Yeah, so we're actually seeing a lot of younger people that are addicted to their phones.
Really?
Yeah, phones and internet.
I got news for you. It's not limited to young people.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. But a lot of young couples are coming to us because technology and pornography are things that are keeping them from really connecting to one another.
Wow, that's a concept I never would have thought. I mean, like young married couples are having this problem, really? Wow. And you get the impression, is it like being on their cell phone, or is it being on like playing video games?
Video games is a big thing.
Wow, really?
Yep.
That's eye-opening. I had no idea. Jeez. Well, you know what? All right. My wife, when we watch television nowadays, I will admit that she's on her phone playing games, and I'm on my phone usually reading Twitter while whatever's on TV is on TV. It's unusual. I mean, it's called second screening, and I never really thought anything about it, but I guess there is true that I could see where that could become problematic and addictive.
Mm-hmm.
Although I also think it probably avoids a lot of fights between my wife and I.
Which and I link that to substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to describe that, in particularly when I see young people. What I think I'm seeing as they're walking down the hallway or on a, in a public space, they're soothing themselves, which is how I think people start down the road with alcoholism, substance abuse. They're soothing themselves, which then gets in the broader category of this, age of anxiety, depression. We know a whole lot more about depression now. So
everybody's looking for another thing that will give them a dopamine release mentally. I believe that. I can see that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, this is taking a turn.
Yes.
Everything's coming after us, Mr. Hickey. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, we've always heard. I mean, from the '80s when there were weight issues, when it was the big issue was everything in moderation. It was often thought of in terms of food, which I will say that when I have my greatest failures in weight is when I forget that everything in moderation. I don't need 17 cookies. 1 cookie will do. But I guess it's true. I don't really think about it much in terms of my technology, but I'm on technology constantly. I have my Apple Watch. I have my phone. I will tell you that because I was the only host today, this is the first time I have ever done a podcast where I didn't pick up my phone in the middle of it. I did, however, check my Apple Watch a couple of times. I
did notice your phone is turned down.
It
so
is,
you can't even see the screen.
Well, because I wanted to focus intently on Sylvia
so
and not be distracted. Yes, so she will come back. So she knows that she has my full attention. Although had Ms. McCusker been here, I would have let her take some of the questions, and I would have shot photographs and taken some videos, and I might have been doing live, Instagram live, and all sorts of stuff. But because I was by myself, I was fully engaged with our guest.
Just as a way of
mildly engaged with you.
You'll be interested to know that Sylvia, this is prior to you, Sylvia led us into the world of social media. She helped build our first Facebook page.
Really?
And because of that, when Hurricane Sandy hit, we were able to use that, and it led to massive amount of money being donated to Catholic Charities,
and volunteers.
Volunteers, yeah.
Congratulations, Sylvia.
Yeah.
No wonder you've been around for 30 years. You're very useful. Oh, well, that's the truth of the matter. It's like with the ones who I'm always happy when I see. My father stayed at his job for 40 years. My mother stayed at her job for 30 years. I don't understand that in any way, shape, or form. Mr. Hickey, you've been here for 17 years, right?
Yes.
But prior to that, you were somewhere else, right?
Yes.
And probably someplace else from that. And
I never thought
else.
I'd be here 17 years.
17 years. That's hard. Yeah, I think we're all surprised you're still here. But Sylvia, we're not. Thank goodness Sylvia is still here running the show. That I'm very happy about.
That was a good one.
Thank you. I was waiting. I had to wait 57 minutes before I got a good one in there. But it came. I was patient. Just remember, I was going to wrap this podcast up 30 minutes ago, and you had me keep it going. But I'm actually very glad that you did, because I had forgotten about domestic violence myself, and I'm glad we touched on that again, because actually, to be honest, one of the reasons I've tried to get you on in previous years was because I wanted to do a domestic violence podcast during the month of October.
That's a great idea.
It is a great idea.
And I would like to make it more than just a podcast. So start percolating in your mind, Sylvia.
For next year.
For
I got
next October.
A year to
you
plan.
got to. Not only do you have a year to plan, you have a year to have somebody else do it. But in lieu of that, I really do want you to come back in October, and we'll do an entire domestic violence. We'll do a video series. We'll do everything, because it's
Sylvia knows all these months. Because there's like in August.
I think we all know the months.
Mental health.
Oh, you mean what they're for? Right, got it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mental Health Awareness Month. November is Adoption.
The day
month.
in August, honoring people who died from substance abuse.
Right.
Then there's Opioid Awareness Week in September. I mean, there's all kinds of programming. She could be sort of a permanent guest.
Sounds to me like she could be part of the communications department too.
Well,
so I'm fine with that as well.
Ambidextrous.
Well, Sylvia, thank you very much for joining us today. I really do
Thank you,
appreciate it, and you were fantastic. Don't listen to what anyone else has to say. You are outstanding, and please come back again because I really do appreciate experts. Mr. Hickey, thank you for allowing me to interrogate one of your staff members again.
Yeah,
thank you.
She's worth listening to.
Yes, I'm always happy to be here in the East Conference room of Catholic Charities. Yeah. I'm going to start. Just put Mr. Walsh on the outside of that door. That would be great, actually.
Annex office.
That's right. I need one of these. I need more spaces in the diocese I can just hang out. So.
Well, it's a good place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree with you. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back next week. Bye.